for joining us. It has been a busy week. The government shutdown became the longest in history. FIFA announced plans to launch a new peace prize. Who are they possibly going to give that to? And at the pageant for Miss World Chile, one contestant took the talent portion to a new level by performing with her death metal band. Yes! Yes, yes, yes. If she lost to someone twirling a baton, there is no justice in this world. You don't expect someone in a beauty pageant to be good at death metal. The same way you'd be surprised if you found out that I have a contemporary R&B album. But you know what? I do. And it is sexy as fuck. Meanwhile, Tuesday was election day in many places, and Democrats did well across the board, including right here in New York, where Zohran Mamdani decisively won the mayoral race and took an entirely earned victory lap afterwards.
I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name. As we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few.
Yep, pretty satisfying. Now, some actually criticised that speech, with Van Jones calling it sharp and a character switch from Mamdani's tone during the campaign. But that seems deeply unfair to me. He just weathered one of the most Islamophobic campaigns in recent memory. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life is a frankly superhuman level of grace to extend to a man who has yet to pronounce your name correctly once. Especially given that he could have said, Andrew, your campaign was terrible. What was it with the weird AI ads, especially this one that you inexplicably released, featuring the Bill from Schoolhouse Rock, pregnant and with luscious kissable lips? Do you want to fuck the Bill from Schoolhouse Rock, Andrew? Do you? Well, great news, now you actually can in your private life. I wish you the best, you pervert. And look, we will talk more about New York's mayoral race later in the show, but for now, we're going to dive straight in with our main story this week, which concerns murder. You know, the thing that cats are constantly plotting. Cats only want two things: fancy feast chicken pâté and the slow, painful death of their enemies. Murder is also, in a sense, what this singer did to the national anthem last year during an election debate for third-party candidates.
Can I go back, please? I got too nervous. Through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled
Excellent. Rest in peace to the national anthem. Now, was that tough to watch? Yes, it was. But does the fact that Jill Stein had to stand there listening to it make it a little better? Abso-fucking-lutely. Now, specifically, this story concerns something called felony murder, which I know sounds redundant. After all, aren't all murders technically felonies? But it's a particular type of charge, as this local news segment chose to explain with some odd framing.
Felony murder is not the pre-planned, made-for-TV murder you might be thinking. So, WTF is felony murder? Well, felony murder allows anyone involved in a dangerous crime to be charged with murder if someone is killed during that crime. So even if the person didn't actually kill someone, they can still get charged. So let's say you're the getaway car driver for a bank robbery, and your accomplice panics and kills the bank teller. You can be charged with murder without even stepping into the bank building or having a gun or pulling the trigger.
That is honestly a pretty good explanation, albeit with a very distracting intro. What is that? You're talking about a murder charge here. Why go with wacky graphics and music that sound like a circus clown's alarm clock? Now, if you're talking about something boring like escrow, sure, goof it up to the max, but not if the subject is serious. The last thing any viewer wants to see is that graphic, followed by a reporter saying, so, WTF is the age of consent. But to reiterate, felony murder is basically a felony plus a death equals a murder charge, even if you didn't intend to kill anyone and even if you are not the one who did the killing. And as you'll see, these charges can go way further than just getaway drivers in bank robberies because, crucially, you don't have to be an active participant in a killing to get charged with felony murder. You don't even have to be anywhere near it. Take what happened when these 4 men broke into a house in Florida to steal a safe. When someone there tried to stop them, one of them beat her to death. But under felony murder, all 4 were charged with her killing, as well as this guy. And I'll let him explain why.
I'm in prison because I loaned my keys to my roommate.
It was 2003, the morning after a party at his house in Pensacola.
He said, "Can I borrow your keys to your car?" And I said, "Sure."
He went back to sleep. Holly says when he woke up and his car wasn't back, he called his roommate, who said they were about to break in.
If I would have really have taken it serious, I would have called the police.
But under Florida's felony murder rule, Holly was just as responsible as the man who killed Snyder. Holly, like the other 4 men, was sentenced to life without parole.
Yeah, he was sentenced to life for a murder that took place over a mile away that he didn't know was going to happen and where his involvement was limited to lending his car for the burglary. It's enough to make you ask, what the fuck? Oh, no, sorry, no, I actually don't need those graphics. I'm an adult being upset, not a clown juggling bowling pins. And the thing about felony murder is, it's actually much easier for a prosecutor to obtain a conviction under it than under a standard first-degree murder charge where they have to prove the defendant intended to kill. Because under felony murder, all they have to prove is someone committed or aided in a felony that led to a death. And if you're convicted, judges can have little discretion on sentencing. In fact, 11 states in the federal system mandate life without parole for all felony murder convictions, while these states mandate it in at least some cases. And around half of US states allow death sentences for unintentional killings under felony murder laws. In fact, since 1985, 11 people have been executed for participating in a felony during which a co-defendant committed homicide. That is 11 people executed for murder despite not killing anyone. And look, I oppose the death penalty in all cases, but we clearly shouldn't be executing people for murder if they did not murder someone. You can actually find more tips like that in my new law textbook, A Practical Guide to the Most Obvious Shit You've Ever Heard. And while nobody keeps stats on felony murder convictions nationwide, in the states where they do exist, the numbers are astonishing. In Pennsylvania and Michigan, 1/4 of people serving life without parole there were convicted of felony murder. That's over 1,000 in each state. And approximately half of California's prisoners serving life without parole were convicted of felony murder. And while in some of those cases, prosecutors were simply using the charge as an easier way to get a conviction for someone who did actually commit the murder, in many, many others, they weren't. In fact, a study in New York State found that half of those convicted and punished for felony murder were not proven to have killed anyone. So given all that, tonight, let's talk about felony murder. And let's start with its origins, because like so many horrid things in American culture, it actually came from England. The idea began being applied in British courts in the late 18th century, but in 1957, England abolished its version of felony murder, and other common law countries like India and Canada followed suit, except America. Instead, it's doubled down and hard. In fact, in its current form, felony murder has been called a distinctly American innovation, or as the Michigan Supreme Court described it, a historic survival for which there is no logical or practical basis for existence in modern law. And look, if we're going to keep weird old laws on the books, let's at least keep the fun ones. Like the 1971 Minnesota statute that says, and this is true, no person shall operate, run or participate in a contest, game or other like activity in which a pig, greased, oiled or otherwise, is released and wherein the object is the capture of the pig. Those words were written and voted on by lawmakers, and I think my favourite part is the phrase, a pig greased, oiled or otherwise. Because they knew if grease and oil were off the table, by God, someone would figure out another way to make a pig slippery. Now, there are some state variations. For instance, these limit felony murder charges to killings by participants in the felony, but these only require what is called proximate cause, which means they allow felony murder convictions when non-participants in the underlying crime do the killing. And that can lead to cases like what happened in Elkhart, Indiana, when a group of 5 unarmed young men, 4 of them teens, broke into a house in the afternoon to burglarise it, believing no one was at home at the time. Now, unfortunately, the homeowner was actually asleep upstairs and he grabbed his handgun, came downstairs and began firing his weapon, killing one of them. Now, the 4 teens survived, only to then be charged with felony murder in the death of their friend, which they still cannot quite believe.
I didn't really comprehend it. I didn't put my mind around what I was really about to go through. To me, we all should be charged for what we done that day, but nobody committed murder, so why should we be charged with it?
I committed burglary, you know. Serious things did happen. Denzel's gone, you know. I mean, I'm not saying I don't deserve time.
The trial lasted just 4 days. The teenagers were all found guilty of an adult crime. 17-year-old Levi was sentenced to 50 years in prison. 16-year-old Blake and 18-year-old Anthony Sharp each got 55 years.
Look, I know they started things by trying to rob the house, but it's a bit of a stretch to go from that to 5 decades in prison for a killing that someone else committed. At a certain point, assigning an outcome to a chain of causation no longer makes sense. It is why, when the Oscar for Best Actor was awarded last year, it was given to Cillian Murphy and not to his parents, whose hot Irish sex led to his existence. The fact is, felony murder can be applied in an astonishingly broad array of circumstances. There are stories of people being charged with it after doing drugs next to friends who OD'd, or in the wake of a robbery where a frightened victim died of a heart attack afterward without having been struck or injured by the robbers. And take what happened to Lakeith Smith. When he was 15, he was robbing a house in Alabama with several friends, and one of them got shot. But he refused to plead guilty to felony murder for a reason that, when you hear him explain it to a reporter, is pretty understandable.
Can you tell me why didn't you take that plea deal?
I knew I ain't do it. Like, I'm not gonna cop out for no 25 years for a murder I ain't do. And the people who did it, they got free. Like,
You said the people who did it. What do you mean?
the police, they got free. Like, the one who pulled the trigger and killed them.
Yeah, his friend was shot by a cop, and yet Lakeith got 65 years in prison, which doesn't feel like justice, does it? And his mom sums up the absurdity of that situation pretty well.
He should have got the proper time for the crime that he committed, the burglary and the stolen property. To 65 years over a young guy, 15, who didn't kill no one. Didn't kill no one and didn't shoot at no one. Alabama. Yeah.
Exactly. I honestly couldn't say it better. In fact, at this point, I'd argue Alabama's official state motto should probably just be an entirely derogatory, yup. But while Smith refused a plea deal, many don't, and that's actually one of the big hidden ways this charge can send people to prison, because prosecutors can use the threat of a huge sentence under felony murder to get people to plead down to lesser charges. It's one reason why felony murder has been called one of those quiet drivers of mass incarceration we never acknowledge. And it is just incredible to find out something most people have never even heard of is propelling an issue as prominent as mass incarceration. It's like learning most heart attacks occur due to people chasing greased-up pigs for sport. Though that would at least explain why there's a fucking law in Minnesota against it. And while nobody knows exactly how many plea deals were obtained under the threat of a felony murder sentence, some who've taken one have since spoken out, like Kevin Reese. He pled to aiding and abetting second-degree murder after he participated in a robbery when he was a teenager and one of his accomplices ended up killing someone. And here he is explaining his decision to take that plea.
I had 2 choices. My choice was either go to trial. In the trial, according to felony murder, I wasn't going to win because the threshold to prove someone's guilt for felony murder is so low. Only thing they had to prove was that I was there, right? And it was, no fact, I was never saying I wasn't there. I was saying I didn't do it. And my other choice was take a plea for 22 years and go do 15 years in Minnesota correctional facilities. I had to rationalize this in my 18-year-old brain. I had to almost rationalize, okay, maybe somehow I deserve this. I had to literally say, well, and rationalize taking 22 years instead of getting life.
That is horrible. Because normally, when people are forced to choose the least bad option, it just means that they resign themselves to having lunch at a Cracker Barrel. Look, When you're on the highway and the other options are places like Sada IHOP, Mystery Meat Buffet, one-way ticket to the toilet, and homophobic Wendy's, then unfortunately, Denny's with Confederate vibes is gonna be your least bad option. But despite making the pragmatic choice, it had huge impacts on Kevin, both practical and emotional.
All of the programs inside of the corrections facilities, like it's about cognitive, behavioral, criminality, all of that thinking. So you be in spaces where you have to lead with, I am Kevin, I'm a murderer, right? You have to lead with that. But each time that I had to lead with that, where I'm a murderer, it's really easy to get bitter, right? It's really easy to have a lot of distrust and disdain for the system in itself. And it also feels very much like being kidnapped. It feels very much like being kidnapped because the crime, like what you did and why you're there, there's a disconnect, right? So each time you look at your paperwork and it says the big red M, murder on there, you cringe. I'm really here for murder. I'm really here for murder.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly frustrating. If they're going to reduce someone's life to a big red M for murder, the very least they could do is then add a smaller red, but, you know, not literally, it's just a weird legal quirk. Just Google felony murder if you want to know the deal. Shit's insane. And since felony murder involves the US criminal justice system, you're probably already assuming it's applied disproportionately to non-white people. But the thing is, you'll be shocked to learn that white people are actually far more likely to face prison compared to, just kidding, of course it's applied disproportionately to non-white people. In fact, even within the context of the American justice system, the extent to which that is true is shocking. In New York, in cases where people were convicted of felony murder as accomplices, so where they were not charged with killing anyone, Hispanic people were about 12 times as likely as white people to be convicted, and black people were more than 34 times as likely. In Wisconsin, where black individuals account for less than 7% of the population, they make up 76% of those incarcerated for felony murder. And in St. Louis, a city whose population is slightly less than 50% black, every single felony murder conviction between 2010 and 2022, a total of 47 people, was of a black person. And very few things are 100% black people. Not even, as we now know thanks to Rachel Dolezal, the Spokane, Washington NAACP. But there's another group on which this law has disproportionate impacts, because a lot of the people you've seen so far were in their teens when their crimes happened, and that is not a coincidence. Young people are more likely to commit crimes in groups and are more impulsive than adults. In fact, felony murder has been described as the quintessential juvenile crime, capitalising on the developmental vulnerabilities of adolescents. That is why it sends a lot of people in their teens and 20s to prison, and often for decades. At one point in Pennsylvania, nearly 3/4 of those serving life without parole for felony murder were 25 or younger at the time of their offence. And look, there are certain places you do expect to find a teenager, a high school, an Olivia Rodrigo concert, in Matt Gaetz' texting history. But it is shocking to see so many locked in prison for felony murder. Just take Almir Nance. He was only 16 when he participated in the armed robbery of a Tennessee Radio Shack, during which another person shot and killed a store employee. Even though Nance was not the one who pulled the trigger, he was given a mandatory sentence of 51 years. And even one of the jurors from his trial was horrified when she learned about his sentence.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard this 51-year minimum sentence?
I was stunned, shocked. You know, a life was taken, and that is a terrible tragedy, a great injustice to the victim, to his family, to all the people whose the ripples of his life would have gone out to for generations. But taking Almir's life when he had just started it and wasn't even formed into who he was going to become yet, really, I felt horrified. And I feel like I followed the instructions, but the law wasn't just, and I regret being a participant in that injustice.
Of course, if you follow the instructions, only to learn that a teenager is getting sent to prison for half a century, that has got to be the worst jury duty experience ever, followed closely in a 1,000-way tie with all other jury duty experiences. So to recap here, felony murder is a law almost no other country uses. It harshly punishes people for killings they didn't commit, and it disproportionately impacts the non-white and the young. So, what on earth is the argument for it? Well, some try to argue that it works as a deterrent against criminal behaviour. When Colorado was in the process of amending its felony murder law, this state senator strongly opposed the change.
Felony murder, just as a concept, ensured that people are not going to be cavalier about who they hang out with and what those people are doing.
OK, so a couple of things. First, maybe back up from your camera just a bit. And second, while it is nice to think felony murder could be a deterrent, there is little evidence of that. In fact, a task force in Minnesota concluded that the existence of the charge does not deter behaviour and does not reduce the risk of reoffence, which does make sense, doesn't it? It is hard for something to be a deterrent if no one knows about it. Think of felony murder laws like Apple TV shows. Sure, there are tons of them out there, but most people have no fucking idea they exist. Now, other supporters of the charge argue it's worth it simply to keep would-be criminals off the streets. Here is the sheriff who investigated Almir Nance's case, defending his 50-year sentence.
What would your response be to people who say, this isn't really working, locking people up, doesn't actually solve any problems?
Well, for those that say it doesn't really solve any problems by locking these juveniles up for a long period of time, Almir Nance hadn't been involved in any more violent crimes.
What? Well, you know, by that logic, fuck it, just lock everyone up forever. And even as I said that, I've just realised that is definitely now going to be the official theme of the 2028 Republican National Convention. So what can we do here? Well, the solution is actually pretty simple. Just get rid of the felony murder charge. Every other common law country did that decades ago, and we should too. And to be fair, some states are at least trying to limit it. Minnesota changed its laws so that someone can no longer be charged with murder unless they intended to cause a death or were a major participant in a murder. And California did something similar, and both states made their changes retroactive, so people convicted of felony murder could ask to be resentenced. And thankfully, after getting media attention, some convictions have been overturned. The Elkhart Four had their felony murder convictions reversed, and the guy with the car keys had his sentence commuted by Florida's governor. However, Lakeith Smith and Almir Nance are still in prison. And if you are seeing a pattern here, congratulations on noticing extremely obvious patterns. And look, no one is arguing that people who commit a felony should go unpunished or that there shouldn't be consequences when someone is killed. But they should be punished for the crime they committed and not one they did not intend or indeed carry out themselves. Because as I hope you've seen tonight, felony murder really doesn't address crime at all. All it does is throw people in prison for decades for something that they often did not do. All of which really begs the question, what the fuck? And you know what? For this one time, I'll actually allow it. And now, this.
And now, C-SPAN callers memorialize Dick Cheney.
Let's start with Vincent. He's in Connecticut on our line for independence on the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, good riddance.
Richard in Kentucky, Republican line. You're next. Good morning.
Being a Christian man, I don't want to speak ill of the dead.
Had he not received an undeserved heart transplant, he probably would have met his makers years ago. Now, I won't celebrate his demise, but I sure won't mourn his passing either. Thank you.
Any miserable warmonger that dies is a good thing. I have nothing good to say about Dick Cheney. A lot of people are dead because of this jerk. He was a snotty jerk on top of that.
I want to talk about something that no one ever talks about. You know that God owned the world. He made all the children. He loved them dearly. It didn't matter what color there were. And he said he would take care of us, and he is. But there is another thing in the air. It's called the devil. He does things his way. He wants to take America and Israel down. Please, people.
Okay, caller,
America.
we're talking about the passing of the former vice president. Do you have anything to add to that front?
Well, not too much.
Moving on. Before we go, a final word about New York's mayoral race, because it was truly insane from start to finish. Just take this moment from the first debate.
Let me ask you this. Are there any parades that don't exist that you think should? Mr. Mamdani?
I haven't thought much about parades, to be honest with you.
Mr. Cuomo?
I have not thought. I don't even know what parade doesn't exist, frankly.
Could be for anything. Mr. Sliwa?
Every parade has the right to exist in New York City.
I mean, that pretty much sums up the whole campaign. Mamdani brushing off a meaningless question, Cuomo frantically trying to change his answer enough so it doesn't look like he's copying Mamdani, and Curtis Sliwa answering a question that no one even knew they could ask. And since no one answered it there, if you want a parade that doesn't exist but should, I've actually got you covered. A Henry Winkler birthday parade, one for that owl in Central Park people loved until he died, and a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, but where the floats are filled with candy and children hit them with sticks. You are welcome. Now, you may have noticed there was one candidate missing there because he'd already pulled out, and that is Mayor Eric Adams. He dropped out back in September, and it does say something that this is how local news covered that.
Mayor Eric Adams is a son of Brooklyn, but Brooklyn voters are not exactly sad he's leaving the race. In fact, many wonder what took him so long.
I'm happy that he's gone, and I'll be voting for Zohran Mamdani.
I myself, from what I know, didn't see a path to victory for him.
We didn't find any New Yorkers this afternoon disappointed about Mayor Eric Adams leaving the race.
They couldn't find anyone. This city has 8 million people. I'm 1,000% sure I could find someone who would vote for a pigeon fucking a bagel in Central Park. But no takers for Eric Adams. That has got to hurt. But given his time as mayor is drawing to a close, we thought we'd take one last look at Eric Adams because he is a deeply weird man. Now, we've played this clip before, but it is worth seeing it again because as answers to questions go, it never gets less shocking.
Mr. Mayor, we've come to the end of what was a very eventful 2023, right? So when you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.
It's incredible. Remember, the question he was asked there was, describe 2023 in one word. Just say Barbenheimer, Eric. It's right there. And the baffling ride that answer took us on is really the Eric Adams experience in a nutshell. He genuinely might be one of the strangest people alive. He received his first 3 paychecks in crypto. He thinks there's a ghost that runs around Gracie Mansion. He gave Diddy the key to the city, and he once proudly showed off a giant new police robot to monitor subway stations, posing for a photo with it where he made half a heart that the limbless robot simply couldn't reciprocate. And even though it doesn't have hands or human features, it still somehow looks like it's thinking, this guy is a fucking idiot. Also, he once said this at a press conference.
I'll never forget when I was talking about a menopause-friendly environment in Brooklyn Borough Hall, and all the women came to me and say, please don't mention that, don't talk about it. I mean, we can talk about erectile dysfunction, but not clitoris stimulation. Something is wrong. Something is just wrong. And we just have to stop doing that.
It's amazing. And remember, there is a non-zero chance that the question he was answering there was, can you describe 2023 in one word? And by the way, kudos to the sign language interpreter. She did not slow down for a moment there, which, as I'm sure Eric Adams would tell anyone who'll listen, is sometimes important to do during clitoral stimulation. Adams also lied non-stop and about everything. For instance, he claimed he was vegan, but not only was he spotted eating fish around the city in the controversy dubbed Fishgate, he then told a reporter, if I see a piece of chicken, I'm gonna nibble on it. He also claimed that for decades he'd carried a wrinkled photo of a fallen police officer friend of his who was killed in the line of duty, even posing with that photo, only for it to be later reported that his staff had found it on Google, printed it in black and white, and made it look old by staining it with coffee. Oh, and he once said this at an event for Dominican New Yorkers.
I may have been born in Alabama, but I'm Dominican, baby.
Eric Adams was born in Brooklyn. But that is still not all. He also relentlessly pandered from wearing this appalling All Lives Matter of baseball caps to holding over 90 flag-raising ceremonies for countries where he'd say some version of New York is the blank of America, filling it in with whatever that country's biggest city was, while shoehorning in this line about what makes that country's immigrants unique.
You believe in families. You believe in business. You believe in public safety. I know how you believe in business, how you believe in family, how you believe in public safety. You believe in family, you believe in business, you believe in public safety, you believe in family, you believe in business, you believe in public safety. We thank the Croatian people here. You believe in family, you believe in business, and you believe in public safety.
Adams really went out of his way to make each nationality feel special. I'd say it was like a New York mayoral Groundhog Day, but that will always refer to when Bill de Blasio dropped a groundhog named Charlotte, who then died a week later, which is a shame, but at least we now know what Eric Adams would have said at Charlotte's funeral. She was a groundhog who believed in family, business, and public safety. Amazingly, Adams was once seen as a promising political figure. Early in his term, he had a 63% approval rating, and there were rumours he was eyeing a White House run. But less than 2 years into his term, he plummeted to a 28% approval rating, the lowest for a New York mayor since Quinnipiac University began polling here, only to drop another 8 points after that. Now, to be fair, he had some successes. He introduced a rezoning plan that some say amounts to the most significant effort to address the city's housing crisis in decades, and he launched a major citywide campaign to strengthen literacy in public schools. But his administration also had some notable failures. He vetoed a bill banning solitary confinement. Misconduct complaints against NYPD officers increased under his administration. While he'd said that Rikers should close, its population not only increased, he also got baptised there by Al Sharpton for some fucking reason, and I have not seen a politician so flagrantly deliver what no one asked for since Nancy Pelosi took a knee while dressed like an African history studies professor at graduation. But the true hallmark of the Adams administration was its constant scandals. He himself was charged with 5 counts of conspiracy, wire fraud, bribery, and soliciting illegal campaign contributions from foreign nationals. And throughout his tenure, his efforts to deny wrongdoing tended to raise more questions than they answered.
I am clear that we follow the rules. I cannot tell you how much I start the day with telling my team, we gotta follow the law. Gotta follow the law. And almost to the point that I'm annoying.
But that is such a red flag. If every morning I called a meeting to say 3 things, guys: work hard, respect each other, and don't participate in the illegal exotic animal trade, you'd wonder what the fuck was going on in our workplace, and I would direct your questions to our office pangolin. Now, the charges against Adams were dropped earlier this year after the Trump administration intervened, but his behaviour only got weirder. And I'm not talking about his first press conference after the charges were dropped when he wore this T-shirt with the phrase, "In God We Trust," or indeed when he later wore a different version of that same T-shirt, which he said was in Spanish to honour the victims of a nightclub collapse in the Dominican Republic, even though it was, in fact, in Italian. No, instead, I'm talking about when Adams suddenly announced he was going to restore ISIS access to Rikers, which had been blocked since 2014. And in the wake of that, he appeared on Fox News with Tom Homan, who seemed to come right out and say there'd been a quid pro quo.
If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to?
Wait, I'll be in his office up his butt? I mean, that certainly sounds like a threat. I guess it technically also sounds like 2 puppets having an affair in the workplace, but mainly, it sounds like a threat to me. But it's not just Adams himself. The scandals surrounding his administration were also relentless. Here is a partial list. His police commissioner resigned after federal agents raided his home and seized his cell phone as part of an investigation into corruption allegations. His police chief resigned and had his home raided in response to allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse of overtime. Adams' girlfriend, a senior education official, retired amid investigation into accusations she didn't show up for work and failed to disclose luxury travel. His buildings commissioner resigned before being indicted on felony counts as part of an alleged bribery scheme involving towing contracts and illegal gambling. His chief advisor resigned before being indicted on bribery and conspiracy charges, including that she traded political favours for an appearance on the TV show The Godfather of Harlem. His first deputy mayor resigned after the FBI raided her home and seized her devices as part of a corruption investigation, and her brother-in-law, also a deputy mayor, resigned after the FBI raided his home as part of that same investigation, writing a letter that just consisted of, "I resign effective immediately. Thank you," which is pretty abrupt. All it's really missing is "sent from my iPhone." Then there is Winnie Greco, Adams' special advisor, who resigned after the FBI raided her homes as part of a conspiracy, fraud and foreign influence investigation. And even after her resignation, she was still volunteering with Adams' re-election campaign until this happened.
A former advisor to Mayor Adams has been removed as a volunteer from his re-election campaign after allegedly giving a reporter a wad of cash stuffed inside of a potato chip bag.
Yep, that happened, and in a Hers sour cream and onion bag, no less. And come on, if you're going to slip someone $300, spring for a better chip. Go with Ruffles cheddar or Cape Cod barbecue, or needless to say, Flaming Hot Cheeto Puffs. Have some fucking respect for the person that you are trying to snack bribe. Now, I have to tell you, all those officials deny wrongdoing, and only these two have actually been charged with the crime, and they've both pled not guilty. But that is still a lot. This has been a truly wild 4 years, and honestly, it seems kind of fitting that when reporters caught up with Adams after he cast his vote on Tuesday, this was his message to the city.
The only message I can give to New Yorkers as I go to the next leg of my journey, I'm leaving you a good city. Don't fuck it up.
I mean, you're taking a lot of credit there, especially given they literally couldn't find a single person in New York who'd miss you on the news. But you are right, this is a great city, though that is not because of you, and sometimes it's in active spite of you. You know, if I could sum up Eric Adams' mayoralty in one word, it'd probably be New York, because this is a place where every day you wake up, you can experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade centre to a fake vegan non-Alabaman leaving a ghost-filled Gracie mansion to lecture all of us on family, business, public safety, and, of course, clitoral stimulation. Goodbye, Eric Adams, you deeply weird man. And now, this.
And now, a look back at the soundbite bonanza that was Curtis Sliwa's mayoral campaign.
I was born in New York. They tried to kill me in New York. The Gattis and Gambino shot me 5 times with hollow point bullets. Should I do the rest of this segment with the beret? Should I take off my... Wow! Put animal abusers in jail. That resonates with a lot of people.
And you're going to have cats kill the rats.
Cats kill the rats. I like that. The rats, the mice will smell them. And it would be like they're on patrol. Consider them like Batman and Robin.
With Eric Adams, the only way to get him in the district was open up a nightclub, have him cut the ribbon, and he'd be there till the break of dawn.
I almost feel like after I hear Andrew Cuomo, I got to take a hot shower. The guy who killed 15,000 elderly people with his executive order in the middle of COVID. Because if you're under 30, Cuomo's always flirty. Andrew Cuomo is a creep, slapping fannies and killing grannies.
I exude confidence, strength, fight, like Braveheart. And at the end of Braveheart, remember, they capture him, they got him on the gurney. The executioner says, "You will bow to the King of England." And he looks at the executioner and he says, "Do your job." And they impale him, they gut him out. That's me, Braveheart. Think of me, Braveheart.
That's our show. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night.